This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. One of the things I like to do during the draft process is to do the same thing that all 32 teams are doing. See, we get into this mode of doing mock drafts and we think, oh, it's all just what Andrew Berry thinks, and that's going to be what dictates it. But the draft is like a lot of things in football. It comes down to a collaborative process. And I don't want my reflection of what the Browns board should look like or my opinion of what the Browns draft is after it happens to just be about what I think. Got to bring in other people. And who else better to bring in than CORY, KINNAN to talk about the draft. Today, what I want to focus on is the linebackers. Right now, the Browns are in an interesting situation at linebacker where they brought in some vets, but they're kind of in flux, right? Like a lot of those guys are changing in and out. CORY, when you look at this Browns linebacker room, do you see as big of a need as some people are making it out to be, or do you think, given what Andrew Berry's tendencies are, that the response might be underwhelming to some?
I think the response is going to be underwhelming. Again, we said last year, like, oh, the linebacker room is abysmal. We have to address the linebacker room. And they didn't. They did. They ran it back, and they were fine. They address the trenches and you keep the linebackers clean and they're okay. You know, Anthony Walker was Anthony Walker. Like, you could tell the guy had suffered a couple lower body injuries over the past couple of years of his career playing out there, but I don't think there were any glaring liabilities. I think Sione Takitaki is one of the more sturdy linebackers you could have in the NFL, especially at Sam. But even when he kicked over at Mike, like, again, not a liability. And then you got a huge step out of JOK. So like they said, no, we don't need to address the room. And obviously they had to this year because they let Anthony Walker walk. They let Sione Takitaki walk. So it is a little bit of turnover, but I think we're sitting in a very similar spot where we say, like, oh, on paper it's underwhelming, but like, if you look what under Berry, what he's asking Mike linebackers to do, it's really chase and tackle. It's really chase and tackle. He's not asking Mike linebackers to get in gaps, displace guards, displace centers, and eat up gaps. You know, like, it's a very different game that he's asking Mike linebackers to play. Now, on the other hand, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, Jim Schwartz said, I want that guy penetrating gaps. I want that guy wreaking havoc in the backfield. Again, it helps when you have that much explosiveness, can get sideline to sideline. But what I will be interested in seeing, though, is, like, was Anthony Walker Jim Schwartz's type of Mike linebacker, or did he inherit? I mean, I know Anthony Walker was re-signed last year, but Anthony Walker is also a Berry guy. I think there was a lot of evidence that in the past season to say, like, it's probably good to let Anthony Walker walk at this point. But was that Jim Schwartz's type of Mike, or did he kind of inherit a Berry guy there? Now you have Jordan Hicks, who, you know, has played with Jim Schwartz in the past, and has, you know, if you look at his tape last year with the Vikings, was really good, and he is a guy who can step down in a gap, who can leverage out on a guard every once in a while, and who can kind of make a play at the line of scrimmage, kind of displace a guard and do what he needs to do there. I don't think, again, on paper, he's not an overwhelmingly dominant linebacker, but like, there's some pretty ass-kicking reps there. So, but again, for the most part, his tackling grade is really good, and they really want good tacklers at Mike linebacker. And so we'll see. Is this a changing of the guard? Is it just like, or does Jordan Hicks really fit with what Andrew Berry still wants at Mike linebacker? But again, 1-year deal. So, like, are they just going to keep signing him to 1-year deals like that Anthony Walker for 3 years? Or are they going to look to draft a guy for next year when Jordan Hicks is back on the market? You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where we sit.
Yeah. Now, with JOK making the step that he did and them finally putting him at Mike and kind of keeping him on the field most snaps, how does that change the dynamic of what you put in that linebacker room now that it's not JOK's kind of in this specialized role? Now it's this JOK is kind of the centerpiece of that that linebacking room, and what pieces work well with him. Like, how do you think that they're going to try to do the math on that?
Yeah. So first off, I want to say I misspoke. Jordan Hicks signed a 2-year deal, not a 1-year deal. But the dead money is really minimal if they do want to cut him next year. But I did misspeak there, so I wanted to clarify that. Yeah. So JOK, I think, you know, I still think he's going to be your will.
Mhm.
Except I think what's going to shift is he's not coming off the field dime. So he'll be your
Mhm.
dime backer now, which is typically where he did come off the field. But at the end of the year last year, Jim Schwartz said, the next step for him is to not come off the field. Um, and so I'm blanking on the second half of that question. My bad, Quincy.
Well, it's like, how do you, like, when with him being on the field more, do
Mhm.
you adjust the pieces around him, or is it kind of just the same thing, just he gets on the field more often?
I don't think so because again, like he wasn't coming off the field in base and he wasn't coming off off the field in nickel anyway. So like the real big shift is just staying on the field in dime, and in that case, there are no other linebackers on the field with him. At that
Hmm.
point, so I still think it's just find a good guy to fit around him. But I don't think they'll go very far outside of their traditional Mike sphere of what they've typically looked
In
for.
in general, like, I've noticed a lot of people think, like, when you have Myles Garrett, that kind of the traditional thinking of, like, okay, you want to overload the defensive line. The Browns have done that to a point. But what we found out is when you have Myles Garrett, teams are not in good faith going to try to throw the ball that much. Like, especially not like 5, 6, 7 step drops. So when you're doing these things, kind of assuming that, hey, if they in good faith try to throw the ball, they're going to have to do this to adjust to it. But teams are just like, well, we're just not going to do that. Like, we're just going to throw this thing quick. So when teams kind of adjust the strategy to that, what positions kind of get more emphasized to kind of play to the strengths that, or play to where teams are adjusting to Myles at, to kind of get that impact that traditionally you would think you would have if you had another strong bookend, which the Browns do with Zadarius Smith.
Yeah. I would say it's the corners. So if
Mm-hmm.
teams are going to three-step drop you and just like look to get the ball out that fast, you got to have some corners you can press. You got to have some corners that you trust to play at the line of scrimmage. Because if they're just trying to quick step, hit slants, or hit a little nine ball down the sideline, like you got to have corners who can stick man for man, and trust in that. But again, I think there's an element of linebacker play that comes in there. I mean, for years we just saw tight ends run up the seam on this
Mm-hmm.
team, man. Like I can recount it from like 2009 to 2017, 2018. Like it always felt like, well, there's a tight end right, like running down the seam. Like it just felt like it was a staple of Brown's defensive football. So I do think there's an element if if they're gonna get the ball out quick, and Jim Schwartz likes to bring pressure from the second level, like if the quarterback thing is, replace the blitz, so if that blitz is coming from the second level, who's going to be at the second level? It's either a slant behind that blitz or it's a tight end up the seam. So I think having a linebacker that can turn and run, which I think is the next step that JOK needs to take, is to
Mm-hmm.
prove that no, I can backpedal, no, I can actually turn and run in coverage as well. He got like a couple garbage time interceptions last year, that one that they gave him credit for, and on that Hail Mary that he didn't actually catch as well. But like, so I think that's also the next step for JOK, is to prove like, no, I can actually drop, I can backpedal, I can turn and run with a tight end. But if you really want JOK penetrating and you want JOK chasing down a quarterback or being that spy, then yeah, you need a Mike who can prove that he can do that. And I don't know if that's Jordan Hicks. That there's not overwhelming evidence that he can do that. He's more of a downhill. I'm gonna sit a gap. I'm gonna set an edge. I'm gonna make a tackle at the line of scrimmage, and I'm not gonna miss a lot of tackles. That's kind of linebacker he is. But I would say that as well. So corners and having one linebacker that you can count, like, no, this guy can robot out, this guy can turn and run.
All right. Now that we kind of talked about what the Browns have, let's look at this draft class. One, when you're looking at linebackers for the Browns, what traits do you value for what it is that Jim Schwartz do? Like, what kind of linebackers are you looking
Yeah.
for? What guys appeal to you?
So are you talking me personally or what I've noticed Andrew Berry tends to?
I want to hear both. I value
Okay.
both
So
you
me
and Andrew Berry's
personally,
thoughts.
I love an ass kicker. Like I love a guy who's not afraid to get in the freaking A gap, who's not afraid to take on contact, stand up a pulling guard, and just disrupt in the interior. Um, he plays for the Chiefs now and had a really good Super Bowl, and he's one of their starting linebackers now. But he was drafted third round, drafted after David Bell, and he's the guy who's like, take this guy, take this guy, take this guy. Leo Chenal out of Washington or Wisconsin. Some of the most violent tape that I've ever seen. Some of the most violent. You go back and watch that dude's Wisconsin tape, and you're like, this dude's an ass kicker, like straight up ass kicker. So I like Mikes who can do that because again, I want my will to be. And again, the Browns do a little bit differently. Jim Schwartz does it a little bit differently, and you want some nuance. So ideally, both guys can do a little bit of both. But um, he's just a straight up ass kicker, and he was a top tier athlete as well. So I think that's another thing I look for. Like, what kind of athlete are you? And again, are you tackling? Like, are you tackling? I think JOK gets away with a lot of missed tackles, because the
Hmm.
Browns just swarmed to the football. But again, when you're penetrating and when you're the first guy to the football, like, yeah, of course, if you're the first guy to the football, you're going to miss a lot more tackles. I think that's just natural to the
Well,
game.
I think
Uh,
this is a great fit for him because like he has that freedom that he can be there that fast and try to
yeah,
make that play. Because Grant Delpit's usually like right there behind him.
right.
Like you have like three, or like it's like Greg Newsome or like Denzel Ward decides that that's a game where he really wants to get in his tackle bag. Like they have so many athletes that can move side to side. It's like,
Mhm.
yeah, if you miss a tackle, that's cool because you just slowed him down. And if you slow him down enough, I mean, Miles still runs like 4.5, so like
Right.
that's still coming across the field.
Right. But back to like what I love about a linebacker is like I just feel like, and we're getting back to it a little bit because we're seeing a lot more 12 personnel. Defenses are playing a lot more too high, so teams are getting back to running the freaking football. Teams are getting back to 12 personnel. Teams are getting back to I mean, look at Patrick Mahomes. His A
Mm-hmm.
dot was extraordinary, and then they started playing too high, and he said, "Okay, I'll just pick you apart." He adjusted his game. He's still doing the thing, but and the Chiefs do it out of 12 personnel, 13 personnel, like more than anybody in the league. So we're talking like, well, it doesn't hurt that they have probably one of the worst receiving cores in the league too, but that's another thing. But we're starting to see that pendulum shift with more too high defenses. The offenses are say, "Oh, we'll load the box back up, and we'll make you put a third linebacker back on the field, and we'll hope that that second, third
Mm-hmm.
tight end is a mismatch on that third linebacker you just put back on the field." So if they're going to try to load the box up like that, I want a linebacker who can get downhill, sit in the A gap, displace, and disrupt. Um, but it just seems like the NFL is transitioning more towards these guys who can backpedal, these guys who can get sideline to sideline, these chase and tackle linebackers. And I get it, and like you can find some really good athletes who are really good at it. But at the end of the day, man, if I find a guy that I see that can just get downhill and be an ass kicker, like I want that guy on my football team.
How do you think the two new rule changes that they've made this year, right? The hip drop tackle and the new kickoff rule, right? I think that's going to be something that just kind of changes who you roster at the end of the day. Maybe like we'll see how that breaks down with the kickoff. But the hip drop rule, I was thinking about that. I'm like, I don't think it's going to be as big as a problem as people are anticipating.
Mhm.
But if it does end up being a problem, I do think like you end up with bigger linebackers again, more than likely, if like any change needs to be made.
Mhm.
What do you think about how that potential rule can change things?
So I hate the rule. I hate the
Yeah,
rule. I think just defenders, especially defensive backs in the open field, like they're running out of ways to bring guys to the ground.
yeah, yeah.
Like they're just
And
straight up running out of ways to bring
it's
guys to the
like
ground.
the Minka tackle on Nick. It's
Yeah,
like what he has like two options other than just
right,
let him run over him.
right. And so I think the biggest impact is we're going to see players like David Njoku, players like Evan Ingram, those tight ends who catch the ball in space and just rack up yak. Uh,
Hmm.
I mean, David Njoku is extremely difficult to bring down.
Hmm.
Extremely difficult to bring down. So I think that's where we're going to see a pretty big impact. Like, I really don't think it's going to have that big of an impact with running backs like Derrick Henry or Braylon Allen coming into the league. Like, I mean, Derrick Henry's Derrick Henry, but like, how often is Derrick Henry getting one on one in space? How often are you tossing the ball to Derrick Henry? Like, so I don't think that's that big of a difference for guys like that.
And if
I
he is, he's
honestly
on the
think,
sideline, so it's like you can just.
right, right. I think honestly, the biggest, I really don't think it's going to have that big of an impact on defensive personnel. I really
Mm,
don't. The only thing I could think of is if defenses. I mean, Nichols taking over the defensive side of the football. Nobody's playing base anymore, really. It's like 20% of defensive snaps are in base with three linebackers. But what I think maybe we could see is like how much more big nickel our team's going to run. Like how many times is that nickel going to be a third safety
mm.
instead of a Greg Newsome or a 5'8" defensive back? So that's where maybe I could see a little bit of shift defensively. Uh, I don't know if it's going to impact second level defenders. My gut says no. I don't
Mhm.
think so because like at the end of the day, look at the linebackers that are coming in the league. These guys are 220, 225 pounds. Like you can't really change the body type of linebackers. Like you just got to kind of roll with what you're getting. And that's kind of the way the linebacker position is looking. Like these guys aren't 240, 250 anymore. They're just not. So I really don't think it's going to have that big of an impact on defensive personnel. And then the kickoff rule, I love that rule. I think
Mhm.
penalizing touchbacks is super freaking cool. I'm really excited about that. But again, I don't know if that's going to have much personnel difference as well. Like if anything, that suits the 220-pound linebackers better than the 250-pound linebackers. So I don't know. That's another thing, we'll see a year, 2, 3 years from now, but I'm pretty hesitant to say that it's going to have an overarching, like, cause a huge, like, shift. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So if the Browns were to take a linebacker, what round do you think they take in, and what prospect class and what prospects do you think they'll go after?
Yeah, man, I don't like this class. I'm going to be honest with you. There's two guys at the top. If they go linebacker at 54, and I would not be opposed to linebacker at 54. Like, there's a couple names, like, they took that guy at 54, I'd be like, good, man. That guy's good. That guy's a baller. I like that guy. If you don't take a linebacker at 54, like, there's like one or two guys day three. I'm like, yeah, I could roll with that guy. Other than that, it's like, if you sign him as a UDFA, maybe. But the two names I like at the top, if they go linebacker at 54, if they're on the board at 54, Texas A&M's Edgerrin Cooper, Michigan's Junior Colson. Those are the two names that I would say, if we're talking 54, those are the two guys we're talking. A lot of people will say Peyton Wilson in that group as well from NC State. He's a bit older than the Browns typically draft that early. And his medicals, he's had like significant injuries, like 3 different season-ending injuries in his career. To me, that's not a player that this front office would risk significant draft capital on. There's a chance he's gone by 54 anyway, but I don't see this front office being the front office to say, like, that's a guy we'll take at 54. So if we're talking 54, Edgerrin Cooper, Junior Colson are the two guys there.
Yeah, this draft class is super weird. Like the ages, like I saw a 26-year-old corner, and I'm like, I don't even think he did the Brandon Whedon thing where he just wasn't in college for a while. Like he just was there.
There's like some 6th-year, 7th-year guys out there, man. The COVID rules. Next year's the last year for the COVID rule, though. So luckily,
we're gonna get back to normal.
The end of that. Yeah.
I was just looking at this, like, how many of these guys are 24 and a half years old? Like, right. It's hilarious because I'm like, I think I graduated college a long time ago. And I'm like, I could have been in college with them. And that's nuts. Like, it's absolutely absurd. But yeah, it's going to be a weird, given that it's such a weird draft class with like how Andrew likes his guardrails. Like, I think 23 is his old, 23 and a half is his oldest.
Better Tillman is the oldest player he's drafted that early.
That's interesting. So I'm wondering, like, with this draft class being how it is, with Andrew's preferences, with how he likes to pick players, what age he likes those players to be at, do you think that this is one where they're going to be interested in taking more than 5 selections? Like maybe they trade back at 55, but like they find a way to kind of just keep it at 5, because I don't see them thinking that they're going to get 7, 8 rosterable guys in this draft, especially if they're picking in the back end.
5's already low, and I'd be like, man, I'd be shocked if they pick 5 players. Like, again, this isn't even about the depth of the class. This is about the literal amount of players in this draft class is literally the lowest in the history of the draft. Lowest amount of players in the history of the draft. When you're looking at like draft trends historically, it'll tell you after pick 20, from pick like 21 to pick like 55, it's really pretty similar value. You know what I'm saying? So you're like right on the edge, 54. You could probably pick there this year if you wanted to. And I think they might, because of just how limited this draft class is. I think this is the year that we might see maybe even a trade up. Like, really? Like maybe they want a guy this year. And they know, like, the only way we're going to do it is packaging up some of these other assets that we might not even find a guy at. We might see him trade up this year, which they haven't done early since JOK. Was that the last guy early they traded up for?
Yeah, that would have to be the last guy on like day 2 or 1 of the draft.
Yeah, so they traded up for JOK in the second round in 2021. We might see a move like that this year, just because, like, by the time you get to pick 85, man, pick 85, there's going to be guys who should be going 5th, 6th round. Historically, they're going to go 3rd round this year. Like, that's just how we're talking, because of just the how small the numbers are and how thin the draft class is. Like, so even by the time you get to pick 85, like, what kind of player are you getting at pick 85 this year? So I really do think we could see a potential move up if they really want a guy and they know, like, there's nothing back. Like, the bottom of the barrel is hitting at pick 90, pick 100. If that's where they're sitting this year, they might say, well, I want nothing to do with that. I mean, it's really rare. We're going back, like speaking of the Jerry Jeudy trade, it's really rare to see the same draft assets in the same draft class package like that for a player, not for a draft pick, for a player. Usually it's like future assets, one asset this year, one asset next year, or all future assets. Like Zadarius Smith, well, the draft had already passed by the time they traded for Zadarius, but like we're usually talking about future assets when we're talking about for a player trade, unless it's like a high profile player that they trade a first round, like a team trades a first round pick for. They said, we don't want this fifth, we don't want this sixth this year. They know there's not going to be anything there. It's barren. So they said, let's go get Jerry Jeudy. Like, why not? So like, I tend to think by pick 85, they're going to be saying, man, this is rough. So if they pick 5 players, I'll be shocked.
Do you think they try to offload into next year? Where they're just like,
yeah, oh, for sure. And they probably, looking at the trends historically, again, the past 2 years, they've traded that second round pick and they've moved back. And I mean, last year was for Elijah Moore, so it wasn't really for a future asset, but they traded back and they've kicked it back next year. I think they can try to do that with 85. I think they can try to do that with their day 3 picks. It's a tough balance because they're clearly in a win now mode. They brought everybody back on the defensive side of the ball. They added some tools offensively. They're clearly saying like we need to win. So how do you balance that? You know, I think you need to take a player early because like you still have to have a young core. You have to have a young core. So like,
yeah, it's tough.
They're not a team that's going to force it. So it's hard to tell. But that's where I say like, there's a player. I have one player in mind. He's a wide receiver who fits their analytical profile like to a T. And consensus big boards, consensus mock drafts have this guy just sliding. For whatever reason, just sliding down the boards. It's because he ran a slow 40 time. Who gives a crap?
You're talking about Keon.
I'm talking about Keon, man. That's the one player I said, if he gets to 35, if he gets to 40, that's the guy I think they could go up and get.
Yeah.
I don't want to mess around with pick 85. Like maybe pick 85. If a guy like Jermaine Burton from Alabama, who has some questionable dealings off the field, you know, punching a fan in the face, soft quitting Georgia is what we'll call it, you know, where they basically said, hey man, you can transfer, but you can't come back. Like we won't kick you out, but you can't come back. Like he's got some questionable things like to deal with. If a player like that falls, like DeJuan Jones did, like Perrion Winfrey did, maybe you take him at 85, but like that's where the kind of range they've shown, like the dead cap is so minimal. Speaking of DeJuan and Perrion, that was around 4 pick. 85 is pretty much there, whatever. The dead cap is so minimal to move on for those guys. It's clearly worth the risk, you know? Like Perrion, complete whiff, but they're okay with it because like I think they're paying like $250,000 in dead cap this year on Perrion Winfrey. Like it's nothing. It's nothing. So now if a guy like that slipped to 85, yeah. But I don't really want to mess with that kind of depth in this class because I don't think it exists.
How late would you wait with Tavondre?
How does he fit in this room, man? You just took Siaki Ika last year. Like, where does he fit in the room? Like, looking at the defensive tackles that Jim Schwartz is getting the most out of, it's gap shooters, man. Like, I mean, you have Dalvin in there, who's an anchor, great. But the other guys, it's Maurice Hurst, it's Shelby Harris. It's going to be Quentin Jefferson, who I would assume is starting next to Dalvin this year. Like, he wants gap shooters.
The pick makes no sense, lad. Like it still doesn't make sense to me. He was active with 2 games, played in like 1.
Why would you do that again this year?
Yeah,
like
it's like I don't like it. It doesn't seem like Jim Schwartz prefers a guy like that. But you've seen the type of guys that Andrew Berry's taken. It's like that doesn't fit.
All the stuff the social team released made it seem like Ika was Schwartz's guy. Like that was the guy that Schwartz. Like that's the way they kind of built it up. So it's just a very head scratching pick in it, and it kind of already seems like a sunken cost. Like already kind of just feels like, I don't know.
Yeah, and then you know we still got the length issues with like there's still those very not great athleticism. Like I don't know. I would love to like. There are some picks where I'm like, I need to know what the thought process, like who was punching the table for this, like what happened that this pick got made, because it's not that like he's such a bad prospect that he couldn't be taken where he was, even though I think that is a little bit more debatable than people made it out to be last year. It's like he just didn't make sense for anything you wanted to do. You got to the season, you looked at him and you were like, well, he can't dress, right? So, like, And then this offseason comes around, and it's even more clear that you have no plans because you brought everybody back, and then you signed QJ, which tells me you have no plans for him this year. It's like,
so part of me thinks that they thought if we give him a redshirt year in the building, if we give him a full offseason in the building, we can form this guy's body. We can form this guy into like who we think he can be. Is what I thought. That is what I kind of think they thought. Like, let's redshirt him. You know, the whole "you're not a dump truck, you're a Ferrari" thing. Like, let's get him in here, get him in our program, see if we can transform his body a little bit and get him out on the field. But again, yeah, you just signed a starter in Quentin Jefferson, and you brought back both your depth pieces. Shelby on a 2-year deal, so like, I think we can kind of call it what it is with Ego right there.
Hey, Andrew Berry has a lot of great things on his track record. Defensive tackle draft track record. It ain't good. To be fair, he has not spent like a lot of high-end resources on it. But
no,
I mean, Jordan Elliott did get a 2-year, 2-year 10. So yeah, San Francisco.
And he was a 4-year starter. Somehow that guy was a 4-year starter in Cleveland too.
Yeah, so there were like 3 of those years where he was a starter technically. I don't know if he was playing starting quality football, but it was.
Even last year though, his snap count was higher than Shelby Harris's and Reese Hurst's.
Yeah. Defensive tackle gets sometimes. It just does. But interesting to see what the Browns are going to do. I think linebacker and defensive tackle have been kind of the most mysterious positions with the Andrew Berry era, right? We kind of have a really good idea of what Andrew likes at wide receiver. We have a good idea of what Andrew likes at corner. Look, they're probably going to draft the corner this year. They don't need to. But Andrew's going to be like, I like him. Draft the corner.
Special teamers, special teamers.
Yeah.
Get a core special teamer in day 3, like that matches the value.
But there are some positions.
Look at Cameron Mitchell's special team, like his special teams portfolio at Northwestern. He played like over 400 special teams reps. So I guarantee round 5, you draft him, you think that guy can be a reserve nickel, and that guy can also play special teams. That's gonna meet the value of a 5th round pick.
Yeah, we can have a whole nother conversation about how people value these picks, and then people talk about like, oh, that's like Donovan Peoples-Jones was a bust. It's like, what?
He's a 6th round pick. He's literally a 99th percentile outcome for that pick.
I was about to say he's a 6th round pick, and you know who he is. That is not a bust, okay? Like you know who the what was it? Who's the 7th round pick? With Demetric Felton? People were like, oh,
6th round pick too. Yeah,
huge bust. Demetric Felton, like. He was rostered for like 2 years, dog.
Yeah,
like that's
teams sometimes don't roster 6th and 7th round picks. Like it's not a like a shocking thing if a 6th or 7th round pick gets cut.
Yeah, you ever want to know how common it is for a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick to not make the roster? Turn on the UFL, see how many 5th, 6th, 7th round picks you see out there. Like not even playing that good. Like.
No.
You're like, oh, I guess this is just what happens to 5th, 6th. It's really just a crapshoot at the back end of the draft. But people still have these weird attitudes about what's a bust or not. But thank you for coming on, Corey. Thank you for talking about linebackers with me, Corey. Let them know where to find you. Are you doing your draft guide again this year?
I'm not. So I had a baby. My wife had a baby in November. So like,
fair enough.
This year I had to punt on it. There's no chance. So. But I am hoping next year to get it back out again. I'm also beefing up. I'm bringing back my draft podcast. And I'm beefing up my draft Substack. So that's going to be my emphasis moving forward. But again, that's Daft on Draft. It's my Substack. Again, the pod will be coming back out. That's where my quarterback charting is. My quarterback charting metric is housed there as well. So I have an interview with Olu Fashanu on there, who is going to get drafted in the 1st round this year. Some things like that. And then I am the managing editor at Browns Wire as well, through USA Today. So those are the 2 places. Fake Corey Kinnan on Twitter. Yeah.
All right. Well, make sure you check him out. Has a lot of great stuff, Browns related, draft related, all kind of just football related stuff there. Some great takes about the quarterbacks in this year's class, which that's another video worth conversation about how it just turned into the Wild Wild West after Caleb Williams. And I thought this was going to be the one where people were going to be like, I don't know if Caleb Williams is that good. Like, you know, because he had the down year after the Heisman, Cliff Kingsbury effect. But like, people aren't doing the crazy thing there. They're just doing the crazy shit with everybody else, which is just fascinating. I'm like, wow, it's not just one. You're doing this with all four guys. Like, I saw Bo Nix get mocked in the first round, and it's not even like surprising me anymore. I'm like, nobody thinks this dude's a first round pick. Like,
no. No, him and Michael Penix are the two that, like, the hype is driving me crazy. Like, these guys are great college stories. Can we let them be great college stories, man? Like,
yeah.
Can we let them be great college stories?
Yeah, and it was rough when I was at the Senior Bowl, and like, you know, Bo Nix is out there, Michael Penix is out there, and we're like, damn.
Terrible.
And we're like, damn, Sam Hartman looks great.
Had the best pre-draft cycle of any of these any of the non-May Williams quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You'd throw Daniels in there too. Well, fine, those three. Spencer Rattler's had the best pre-draft cycle of anybody. Mm-hmm. And nobody's talking about Spencer Rattler.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about him at the Senior Bowl, like, ooh, he looks good. Yeah. He looks great. Like, but Bo Nix, I don't know about that one. Like,
I'll tell you this. I was at the Combine as well. And it's not really worth going to Lucas Oil to actually watch the testing. They cram the media up in a corner. You can't really see anything. It is worth going on the quarterback wide receiver day to see the quarterbacks throw live and to kind of see the wide receivers move live. And I'll tell you this, Bo Nix, they went alphabetical order. So it went McCarthy, Milton, Nix. They were in the same group together. And you go from watching J.J. McCarthy throw, Joe Milton throw, and Bo Nix throw, and that really put Bo Nix's arm into perspective for me.
It was
really Bo Nix's arm into perspective.
When I saw Sam Hartman throw, and I was like, well, he has a live arm because I just saw Bo Nix go behind him. I was like, oh, there's trouble here. Like, there's trouble here with that. But the draft is just hilarious every year. I mean, honestly,
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, we're not in the top 5, so like we just get to enjoy the chaos because we've been that team that's in the top 5. All this chaos is going around, and we think we outsmarted everybody because we gonna get Trent Richardson number 3 overall. Yeah,
those were the days.
Oh yeah,
traded up to get Trent Richardson 3rd overall.
Hey, in retrospect, the 2012 draft debate, most hilarious retrospective draft debate of all time. Trent Richardson or Justin Blackmon. Like, we were convinced they were going to be generational, both of them.
Yeah.
They were generational for sure, just not in the way that we thought. But always good to talk draft with you, Corey. Make sure you check him out. Make sure you check out his stuff on Twitter, Substack, and everywhere else you can find his work. It's always good stuff. Thank you for coming on, Corey. Everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.